The music didn't stop. It shuddered. One sharp, broken violin note trembled across the hall, slicing through the laughter and champagne bubbles like a blade. 250 guests turned in unison, their conversations dying mid-sentence. The air froze thick and stunned as I tasted the metallic sting of my own blood. My cheek burned before I even understood what had happened. My father's hand was still suspended in the air, fingers curled, as if he couldn't believe he'd actually struck me. I could. I felt every year of it. His voice hit me next, louder than the slap. "You will hand over your penthouse to your sister right now, Grace." The chandelier lights glinted off his rigid jaw, and somewhere behind him my mother gasped. Too late, the kind of gasp meant to look like concern, but landed like performance. Madeline stood on the stage in her wedding gown, her smile twitching at the corners as Brent slipped an arm around her waist, whispering something smug behind his champagne flute. My skin pulsed hot. I kept my back straight, the metallic taste thickening on my tongue, the hall spinning with whispers. Someone near the dessert table muttered, "Did he just slap her?" Another voice, "Good God, that's her father." I didn't cry. He didn't flinch. I lifted my chin, looked straight into my father's eyes, and said slowly, clearly, each word a boundary he could never erase. "From now on, none of you get to control my life again." The hall stayed silent, a cold, breathless silence that swallowed every violin string left alive. I turned heels, tapping against marble like a gavel, and walked out. No one followed. Outside, Seattle's night air hit me like truth, sharp, cold, and strangely calming. My cheek throbbed, but what throbbed deeper was something uncoiling in my chest. Something that had been pushed down for decades finally rising. I crossed the hotel steps, the floral wedding arch glowing behind me in useless pink. A woman in a sequined dress whispered to her partner as I passed, "She always creates drama." I didn't look at her, I didn't need to. I'd heard versions of that line my entire life. My phone buzzed. "Madeline, you ruined everything. Dad was right, you're selfish." I stared at the message, my fingers still, my expression unreadable. A second message followed. "Brent, let's be rational. That penthouse is too much for you alone." I put the phone in my clutch without replying and kept walking. By the time I reached Harbor and Hearth, the small cafe tucked along the waterfront, the warmth inside fogged the windows. The bell above the door chimed when I entered, and Eli looked up from the counter. His brows drew together the moment he saw my cheek. He didn't ask what happened. He asked very softly, "What did they do this time?" I sank into my usual seat by the window, the one where I spent years writing code on late nights, the one place I had ever truly felt like myself. The harbor outside reflected city lights across rippling dark water, each flicker a reminder that life moved on whether I was ready or not. Eli brought over a cappuccino without waiting for me to order, placing it in front of me with a quiet steadiness. "On the house," he murmured, sliding a small cookie beside it. "You look like you need it." I touched my cheek, feeling the faint outline of my father's hand still there. The humiliation should have crushed me. Years ago it would have. But now it settled differently, like confirmation, not devastation. Proof of what I had always known: I was not a daughter to them. I was an asset. A tool. Something to rearrange, borrow, siphon from, shape according to their needs and Madeline's whims. I rested my forehead against my hand, staring through the window at passing headlights. My breath fogged the glass for a moment, before fading like a ghost losing its shape. My chest tightened, but the tears that usually lived so close didn't come. What came instead was clarity. I replayed the moments inside the hall, my father's eyes blazing, my mother's mortified glance at the guests, Madeline's entitlement shining brighter than her wedding diamonds. And that demand: hand over your penthouse. A home I had built through 7 years of grinding work, sleepless nights, contracts, code sprints, and more rejection than anyone in that wedding hall had ever tasted. I thought back to when I purchased it. I was 25, living off cheap coffee and late-night debugging sessions, building back-end systems that no one wanted to understand, but everyone desperately needed. I saved every cent. I skipped vacations. I turned down family dinners, not that they noticed. When I finally held the keys to that penthouse, it was the first time in my life something belonged wholly, unequivocally to me. And tonight, they tried to rip it from my hands, as if I earned nothing. As if I was nothing. I lifted my cup, letting the warmth seep into my palms. That feeling, the warmth, felt like a reminder, a warning, a spark. Eli sat across from me without asking permission, his presence gentle enough not to suffocate, but steady enough not to slip away. "Grace," he said, voice low, "people who love you don't treat you like property." The words settled inside me, heavy and true. I didn't respond, not out of weakness, but because something inside me was rearranging, shifting, settling like stone. My phone buzzed again, vibrating across the table. A new message from Madeline. "Give us the penthouse and we'll forget what happened." Forget what happened. Like my father hadn't slapped me in front of 250 people. Like I hadn't bled humiliation across the ballroom floor. Like my worth was negotiable. My breath steadied. I turned my phone face down, opened my laptop, and watched the screen illuminate the table with a cold blue glow. Eli didn't ask what I was doing. Maybe he already knew. My fingers hovered over the keyboard as a single thought sharpened itself in my mind. If they thought they could take from me again, if they believed I would fold the way I used to, if they assumed humiliation still worked, they didn't understand who I had become. I tapped the first key. I didn't know exactly what I was going to build, yet plan code or boundary, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty. This time I wasn't breaking. This time I wasn't running. This time I was going to make sure they never touched my life again. I woke up the next morning with the unfamiliar feeling of stillness pressed against my ribs. Not peace, just the hollow quiet that comes after a storm has ripped through and left everything standing but nothing untouched. Seattle's sky was gray and soft, the kind of morning that used to make me want to curl back under the covers. But today, all I felt was the dull ache in my cheek, a bruise forming beneath the skin like a fading echo of the man who put it there. My apartment should have felt safe. Instead, it felt exposed. As if my family's voices still lingered in the air, clinging to the corners, whispering the same words they'd used my whole life. Selfish, difficult, ungrateful. I wrapped my hands around a mug of coffee just to ground myself. One sip and my phone vibrated. I didn't have to check to know who it was. The first message came from my mother. "Grace, please call. Last night was unfortunate. Let's talk and fix this before more people gossip. Fix this. Not I'm sorry. Not are you hurt. Just stop the gossip." As always, her loyalty was to reputation, not to me. Another message followed instantly, as if she had typed both before sending either. "Your father is beside himself. You embarrassed him in front of everyone." I let the screen dim before I set the phone down. I didn't have the energy to respond, and I no longer felt the obligation. A memory drifted in me at 12, sitting at the kitchen table while Madeline opened her birthday presents. She tore into a new pair of designer shoes while I got a sweater to grow into. My father ruffled her hair and said, "She deserves the best. You'll understand when you're older." But older didn't bring understanding. It only sharpened the edges of truth. Another flash: high school graduation. I got into a top program in California, a scholarship I worked myself raw for. The night before I was supposed to accept, my mother sat me down and cried loud, dramatic tears about how she couldn't bear losing both daughters to distance, even though Madeline lived 20 minutes away. I gave up the scholarship. They thanked me once, maybe twice, then never spoke of it again. My phone buzzed again. This time my sister, "You made last night all about you. You always do." Then another, "You know the penthouse is too big for you alone. Brent and I need it." The entitlement rolled off the screen like heat waves off asphalt. I set the phone face down again, my jaw tightening. For years I had folded myself small to keep the peace, biting my tongue, swallowing disappointment, letting them take and take and take, because fighting felt pointless. My silence had been their favorite weapon. But something about last night unlatched the old hinges. I didn't feel small anymore, just tired. And done. A soft knock startled me, not at the front door, just inside my own mind. A thought, quiet but sharp. If they can hit me in public and demand my home, what else would they be willing to do? The idea troubled me enough that I grabbed my keys and left. The walk to harbor and hearth steadied my breathing. The air carried a faint mist, cool enough to sting but gentle enough to clear my head. When I pushed open the cafe door, warm light spilled across the wooden floors, and the familiar scent of cinnamon and espresso wrapped around me like a blanket I didn't know I needed. Eli looked up from tamping espresso grounds. His eyes softened when he saw me, but he didn't crowd me with questions. Just a quiet, not an acknowledgement that I was still standing, even if a little cracked. "You want the window seat?" he asked. I nodded and sank into the chair that had caught countless hours of my life. The chair where I coded entire systems, escaped holidays, and let myself exist without performing. Eli brought my drink without being asked. "I can stay or go," he said. "Your call." I took a deep breath. "I just need quiet." He gave me a simple okay and walked back to the counter. No judgment, no pressure, no ownership. The contrast stung. My phone buzzed again. I knew it before I looked. "Brent, let's be reasonable. The penthouse benefits all of us. Think of it as future family inheritance." The words made my ribs tighten. Inheritance. As if everything I ever worked for was pre-written into their ledger. As if they had already divided my life into neat, consumable pieces. My thumb hovered over the screen. Not to reply, just to steady myself. Then I did something I'd never done before. I opened the message, read it once, and deleted the entire thread. A small act, but it felt seismic. I wrapped my hands around the warm cup, letting the heat seep through my fingers. My reflection in the window was faint but steady, the outline of someone. I barely recognized someone who wasn't afraid of being alone anymore. Across the street, a couple laughed while sharing an umbrella. A cyclist passed by, splashing water from the curb. The city didn't pause to pity me, and strangely that made me feel stronger. Another memory came uninvited but sharp a night long ago, when Madeline asked to borrow the savings I'd scraped together to buy my first laptop. Mom nudged my shoulder and whispered, "Be a good sister." I gave it to her. She forgot to pay me back. They all forgot. That was the first time I learned that my needs would always be optional to them. The bruise on my cheek pulsed. I took a breath and let it out slowly. I told myself I wouldn't cry today. And I didn't. Instead, a quiet question formed in my mind, a question that sat heavier than the bruise, heavier than the humiliation. If they felt entitled to my home, if they were willing to strike me for it, what else had they justified in the name of family? Because last night wasn't an isolated explosion. It was the harvest of every small cut that came before it. I pulled my laptop from my bag and opened it. The screen glowed blue, illuminating the table, and the lines around my eyes I hadn't noticed forming. I opened my emails, my old documents, my notes, little pieces of a past where I tracked things instinctively but never asked why. Patterns, dates, requests. Money shuffled around like puzzle pieces that didn't fit. My breath steadied as the pieces rearranged in my mind. They always thought I stayed quiet because I was weak. But the truth was simpler. I stayed quiet because I was observing. And now, I finally understood what I had been observing all along. Not a family. A system. A system designed to take from me. A system that now underestimated me. I straightened fingers, hovering over the keyboard, a slow and deliberate strength rising through me. My silence had once protected them. That time was over. Somewhere deep in my chest, something clicked like a lock, turning like a door opening. I wasn't just done letting them hurt me. I was ready to see who they really were. And this time, they wouldn't see me coming. The morning light spilling through harbor and hearth's wide front windows had a softer hue than usual, almost gentle, almost kind, as if the city itself had decided not to push me any further than I already had been. I slipped inside quietly, the bell chiming above my head, a familiar sound that usually soothed me, but today felt like a reminder that life kept moving even when everything inside me had shifted. My cheek still ached with the faint bruise my father left behind, but it was the heaviness in my chest that struck deeper. Eli glanced up from behind the counter the moment I walked in. He didn't smile, not the bright, casual smile he gave other customers. Instead, his expression shifted into something far more careful, like he was looking for fractures in me. "Window seat?" he asked softly. I nodded, grateful for the option, grateful that he asked, instead of assuming. I slid into my usual spot by the glass where the view of the harbor's morning shimmer usually grounded me. Today it only reflected the hollow ache under my ribs. The water outside rippled under a pale sky, and I watched a ferry glide across the surface with slow certainty, as if the world wasn't built to break people the way mine had broken last night. Eli brought the cappuccino himself, placing it gently on the table, along with a cookie I hadn't asked for. "I can stay," he murmured, "or I can give you space. Whatever you want. I think I just need quiet." My voice barely rose above a whisper. "Then, quiet it is." He slid back toward the counter, giving me a look that felt like warmth without pressure. For a moment I let myself breathe. Really breathe. The kind of breath I hadn't taken since the slap, sharp, humiliating, echoing through that ballroom like thunder. My phone was face down beside the cappuccino, and though it didn't buzz, it seemed to hum with the weight of everything unsaid between me and the people who were supposed to love me. I didn't touch it. Instead, I wrapped my hands around the warm cup and let the heat melt the tension in my fingers. Outside, seagulls circled above the harbor, their wings slicing through the still dim light. A delivery truck hissed to a stop somewhere down the street. Life remained untouched by the ruins of last night. But I wasn't. I stared into the foam of my cappuccino and felt a tiny crack of something clarity maybe open inside me. "You're here early." Eli's voice drifted over again as he wiped down a table. He didn't look at me while he said it, giving me the space to decide if I wanted to answer. I couldn't stay home. My throat tightened. Too many echoes. He didn't press. Eli was good at that, letting people arrive at their own truths. I took a breath. "He hit me," I said finally. Eli paused, mid-wipe, head lowering slightly before he looked at me with eyes that held no shock, just a quiet fury on my behalf. "I figured," he said, "but I wanted to hear you say it if you needed to." I pressed my fingertips against the faint bruise. It didn't even hurt as much as everything else. "The humiliation," he asked gently. "The ownership," I corrected. The way he spoke to me like I like. Everything I've worked for belongs to them. Eli's jaw tightened. "People who love you don't treat you like property, Grace." The words hit me harder than the slap. I looked down, letting them settle, letting them sting, letting them feel true. My phone buzzed once, skittering across the wooden tabletop. I didn't reach for it, but the screen lit just long enough for me to see the name. "Madeline." I turned the phone face down again. "Take your time," Eli murmured from the counter, reading my silence perfectly. But I'd had enough time, enough waiting, enough hoping that my family would someday see me instead of the utility I provided. I pulled my laptop from my bag, placing it squarely in the center of the table like a declaration. For a second, my fingers hovered over the keyboard. Not because I didn't know what to do, but because the act of doing it felt like crossing a line I couldn't step back from. My breath steadied. Then I opened my email. Old messages filled my inbox, things I'd archived, ignored, avoided. Requests from my parents. Demands disguised as family needs. The familiar pressure in my chest returned, but this time it sharpened instead of suffocating. One email caught my eye, a message from Brent months ago, asking for insight on a project. I'd forgotten about it. I clicked it open. Inside was a PDF, a business development outline he claimed he wanted my opinion on. Back then I skimmed it and dismissed it. Now the file name glowed at me: lease options, family contribution. Family contribution. The phrase twisted something in my gut. I clicked the file and scanned the contents. There were notes on rental properties, investment opportunities, and my breath stuttered anticipated family-assisted assets. One line read, potential leverage GL property, GL Grace Langford. My penthouse. My blood ran cold. I scrolled, heart pounding harder with each line. There were details only Madeline or Brent could have known, details about my building, my mortgage history, even my HOA fees. The casual confidence in the plan made my skin prickle. Brent had been studying my life like a blueprint. Eli's voice broke through the rising static in my ears. Grace, I looked up, realizing my hands had curled into fists. Everything okay? He asked. No, I said, but it will be. He nodded once, trusting me without needing an explanation. I went back to the document, scanning metadata timestamps. The file had been created on Madeline's old laptop, modified by Brent, sent to my father 2 weeks before the wedding. A line of heat pulsed under my skin. This wasn't a sudden request at the wedding. This wasn't impulsive. This wasn't emotional. It was planned. My fingers moved faster now, opening tabs, connecting dots. Every decision they'd made that once felt chaotic now aligned into a disturbing straight line. Their entitlement wasn't a flaw, it was a strategy. I leaned back in my chair, letting the truth settle into my bones. The slap was just the moment the mask cracked. The rot underneath had been there for years. Eli approached quietly, placing a fresh napkin on the table and offering a softer look. If you need help, he said, I'm here. I shook my head gently. This is something I need to see for myself. He didn't argue. That was the thing about Eli. He respected boundaries the way my family never did. I turned back to the laptop, a single electric thought forming fully. For the first time, they had been watching my life. But now I was watching theirs. And unlike them, I didn't need to lie, threaten, or steal to protect mine. I needed only the truth. My silence would no longer shield them, it would expose them. And for the first time, I felt the spark of something dangerous. Not rage, not revenge. Clarity. The intercom buzzed just as I finished tying my hair back, its sharp tones slicing into the quiet of my penthouse. I paused, my fingers tightening slightly. No one ever came here unannounced. No one except Miss Langford. The doorman's voice crackled through the speaker, uneasy, in a way I'd never heard before. Your parents are here. They insist it's urgent. My stomach didn't drop. It didn't twist. It simply stilled, as if bracing for an impact it now recognized all too well. Send them up, I said, though. My voice felt distant, detached. I wasn't inviting them into my sanctuary, I was acknowledging their presence on the battlefield. I didn't bother adjusting my shirt or putting on makeup to hide the bruise. For once I refused to shape myself into something more palatable. I walked to the door and waited back, straight shoulders squared, feeling the once familiar tremor of dread. Except this time it wasn't trembling, it was dissolving. The elevator dinged. The doors slid open. My parents stepped into the hallway. Douglas Langford looked like a storm in a suit, broad-shouldered, jaw-locked eyes blazing with indignation he thought he had the right to feel. Evelyn followed one step behind, pale, trembling, her pearl necklace slightly askew, the only sign she hadn't slept. Grace, she breathed, as if she were the wounded one here. Douglas didn't wait. We need to talk, he barked, the command sharp enough to bounce off the hallway walls. I didn't move aside. I leaned against the doorframe, blocking the entrance deliberately. 5 minutes, he snapped, stepping closer. Your behavior last night was shameful. The bruise on my cheek pulsed. I stayed where I was. My behavior, I repeated, my voice calm as glass. Interesting choice of words. Douglas took another step forward, reaching for my arm the way he always had, like I was something to be moved, positioned, handled. But before his fingers could close around me, I pulled back steady and sharp. "Touch me again," I said quietly, "and security will escort you out." He froze. The change was instant. His jaw went slack for a fraction of a second, shock disbelief. Because I had never spoken to him that way, never challenged him, never made him stop. But I wasn't 12 anymore, and I wasn't afraid. "There are cameras," I added, nodding toward the ceiling fixture. "High resolution, sound included." Douglas lowered his hands slowly, like someone realizing a gun was pointed at him. Evelyn stepped forward, then her voice trembling with the performance she'd perfected over decades. "Sweetheart, let's not do this." "Your father didn't mean he meant every second of it," I said flatly. She blinked, her lips parting as if she expected me to waver. I didn't. The silence thickened until Douglas broke it, with the subtle shift of his weight, irritation flashing across his face. "We're here," he said, "because you made a scene, and because Madeline cried all night. You owe her an apology." I laughed, actually laughed, a small stunned sound. "I owe her an apology? She asked for my home last night, at her wedding." "Family shares things," Evelyn replied quickly, almost desperately. "Especially when someone needs help." I tilted my head. "Family protects each other. Family doesn't assault their daughter in front of 250 people." Evelyn flinched. A real flinch, not the delicate little ones she'd used to get sympathy. It was the first thing she'd done today that hadn't been rehearsed. Douglas's voice dropped dangerously low. "Enough. We came here to resolve this, and you're making it worse." "No, Dad," I said softly. "I'm making it clear." He opened his mouth to speak again, but I cut him off before the old rhythm set in him, barking me, shrinking Evelyn, mediating everything, melting into the same toxic pattern. "Let me make something perfectly simple," I said. "I am not discussing the penthouse. I am not explaining my choices. I am not smoothing over your embarrassment. And I am not obligated to make any of you feel better about what you did." Douglas's nostrils flared. "You think you can talk to us like that?" "Yes," I said, "I can." It wasn't yelled or spit or thrown, it was stated, and the quiet of it made it heavier. Evelyn's lip quivered. "Grace, please," she whispered. "We don't want this to become public." Ah! There it was. Not concern, not remorse. Fear of exposure. "You're worried about appearances," I said, softly tapping the camera with my gaze. "Maybe you should have thought about that last night." Douglas stiffened, clearly calculating something behind his eyes. For the first time I saw real fear flicker there, small but unmistakable. The fear of losing control. The fear of consequences. The fear of being seen for what he was. I let the silence stretch. "Everything valuable is already in secure storage," I added casually, as if commenting on the weather. "In case you came here, looking for anything else." Evelyn inhaled sharply, turning to look at Douglas, as if he had forgotten to warn her this version of me existed. "We're your parents," Douglas muttered, but the line fell flat, landing between us like a worn-out shield. "And I am your daughter," I said, "not your property." For a brief second, no one breathed. Evelyn recovered, first smoothing her blouse with shaking fingers. "We didn't come to take anything," she said softly. "We came because we care." I raised one eyebrow. She grimaced. "We care about what people will think." There it was, the truth she couldn't contain. I stepped forward slightly. Not aggressively. Just enough to make sure my voice couldn't be misinterpreted. "If you cared about me last night, wouldn't have happened," I said. "You care about control. You care about image. You care about Madeline's comfort. But me, you've never cared about me unless I was useful." Evelyn's eyes glistened, but I saw the calculation behind them. The wheels turning. The attempt to pivot. To play the fragile mother card again. I didn't give her the chance. "This conversation is over," I said, reaching for the door. Douglas stiffened. "You're making a mistake," maybe, I replied. "But at least it's mine." I pulled the door open, gesturing toward the elevator. Evelyn hesitated. "Grace, please." For the first time, I said quietly, I don't owe you anything. They stepped into the elevator, both of them smaller somehow. Douglas, without his posture of authority. Evelyn without her mask of polished control. The doors slid shut with a soft, mechanical hiss. I stood there long after they disappeared, letting the hum of the building settle around me. They didn't apologize. They didn't ask how I was. They didn't even say they loved me. They came to reclaim what they thought was theirs. They left realizing it never would be again. For the first time in my life, there was no shaking in my chest, no guilt pulling at my ribs, just a simple, steady truth. If this was their first move, they had no idea what was coming next. The apartment was too quiet after my parents left, the kind of quiet that didn't soothe but exposed every bruise the night had left behind. I sank onto the edge of the couch, letting the silence press against me. Not oppressive, not frightening, just heavy in a way that felt honest. I'd spent so many years drowning under their noise that this new quiet felt like the first breath after surfacing from deep water. Then my phone buzzed. I didn't move at first. The tiny vibration skittered across the marble side table, a sound I'd grown to associate with expectation obligation and manufactured emergencies. When it buzzed again, I finally reached over and flipped it face up. 8 messages. All from people who claimed to love me. The first voice note was from my mother. Her tone wasn't gentle. It was tremulous, like she'd rehearsed crying and hoped it would land convincingly. Grace, your father is devastated. You escalated things last night. People are talking. You need to call us back before the situation worsens. Not a single word about the slap, or my cheek, or the humiliation. The second message came right after, her voice tighter, faster, as if afraid I wouldn't give her another chance. You misinterpreted what happened. Your father was under stress. We were all under stress. Weddings do that. My breath left me in a quiet, disbelieving exhale. Weddings do that. As if I were supposed to nod and agree that violent outbursts were natural rites of passage. I hit archive without replying. Another ping. Madeline, you owe me an apology. You embarrassed me in front of everyone. Seriously, how could you make my wedding about you? A moment passed before another message followed. Also, can you talk to the building manager at Crescent Shore? They're threatening eviction if we're late again. This is obviously a misunderstanding. Of course. Even in her anger, she went straight for what she wanted. I let the screen dim again. But the next message flashed before I could look away. Brent, let's be rational, Grace. The penthouse benefits the whole family. You don't even use half of it. Mads and I are building a future. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. I stared at his words until the letters blurred slightly. Benefits the whole family. The entitlement was staggering, but not surprising. Not anymore. Another message came through seconds later, as if he'd been crafting it before I opened the first. I'm trying to be diplomatic. Don't push us into a corner. I almost laughed at the irony, him warning me not to push him into a corner while he tried to take the home I built corner by corner. I placed the phone face down again. This time the gesture didn't feel defensive. It felt decisive. My apartment exhaled with me. The quiet didn't press as harshly now. It felt cleaner, as if the air was finally choosing my side. Still, a weight remained low in my chest, an old familiar ache. The ache of being expected to sacrifice myself for family unity. The ache of being conditioned to accept that my needs were optional and my silence required. I didn't want that ache anymore. I grabbed my coat and purse and headed out. The walls of my home were warm, but they still echoed too loudly with history. The air outside tasted of mist and metal. Seattle's overcast sky hung low, but for once it didn't feel heavy. I walked quickly, my breath steadying with each step, until the familiar glow of harbor and hearth came into view. I pushed through the door, letting the gentle warmth spill over me. Eli looked up immediately. "You're back fast," he said quietly. "Couldn't stay home," I whispered, sinking into my usual seat. "Too many ghosts." He didn't ask whose ghosts. He already knew. He brought me a latte without being asked, setting it down gently. "Do you want to talk this time, no?" I said. "Just space." "Done," he replied and stepped back. I glanced at the condensation on my cup, watching it drip in slow trails. The cafe hummed with soft conversation, the hiss of steaming milk, and the clinking of cups. A safe soundscape, one that made thinking easier. I opened my laptop again, the familiar glow anchoring me. 3 tabs appeared in quick succession. Harper Boyd, my lawyer. My investment portfolio. Crescent Shore Residences. I tapped the last tab, staring at the sleek building on the website. Madeline had obsessed over Crescent Shore for months, posting pictures talking about the corner units, the view from the Sky Lounge. She'd practically begged Brent to find a way to get them in. A thought flickered through me then, sharp and unexpected. What if they wanted my penthouse because they were drowning? I clicked into their public profiles. A few old posts. Pictures of brunch, gym selfies, and then recent silence. No new photos. No announcements of moving into our dream space like they'd promised online. I leaned back, the realization settling like a stone in my stomach. My family wasn't just entitled, they were desperate. That made them dangerous. My phone buzzed again. A new number this time. "Stop digging, you won't like what you find." A chill crawled up the back of my neck. I turned the phone toward Eli without letting him read the message in full. "Strange number," I said casually. He looked at the screen for half a second, then at me, his jaw tightening. "Do you want me to walk you home later?" The offer was protective without being possessive. Something in my chest loosened at that. "Maybe," I said softly. But the truth was, I wasn't afraid. Not anymore. That message didn't scare me. It confirmed something essential. There was something to find, something buried, something they didn't want me to uncover. I took another sip of coffee, the bitterness grounding me. My laptop cursor blinked back at me, steady and patient. This was no longer just about a slap at a wedding, or a penthouse they wanted to steal, or years of being undervalued. This was about control, power, and the quiet weapon I'd always underestimated: my own silence. I created a new document and titled it Family Transactions. Then I wrote the first line beneath it in clean, deliberate characters: "Find what they're hiding." I stared at those words, feeling the truth settle deeper. They had built their world on the assumption that I would stay quiet, and for years I did. But silence doesn't mean submission. Silence can mean strategy. I closed my eyes, feeling a steadiness return to me, not as a reaction, but as a choice. Their messages tried to guilt me. Their manipulation tried to corner me. Their desperation tried to drag me back into the role they'd assigned me since childhood. But now my silence was no longer their shield. It was becoming my sharpest weapon. Night settled over Seattle like a bruised purple, heavy, slow to fade. I sat alone at my dining table with only the blue glow of my laptop cutting through the dark. The rest of the penthouse stayed unlit on purpose. I didn't want warmth, didn't want comfort. I wanted clarity, sharp and cold. The same kind of cold that had lived in my parents' voices for years. The folder I'd created earlier, Family Transactions, sat open in the corner of the screen. I clicked it once, the digital equivalent of opening a wound, and began sorting through every file I'd pulled from old emails, half-forgotten messages, and scraps of documents I'd ignored back when I thought my family's chaos wasn't my problem. It didn't take long before I found the PDF Brent had once sent me, the so-called business development plan. I remembered glancing at it months ago and assuming he was looking for validation. Brent always wanted validation. Now, though, with the fog of loyalty stripped away, the document felt different, weighted, suspicious. I zoomed in on the file. Notes scattered the margins. Ideas about lease options, projected returns, vague promises of substantial family support. And then, the line I had seen earlier but hadn't truly absorbed until now: potential leverage, GL. Property. My initials. My home. My life. But it wasn't just the content that made my pulse climb. It was the small details, the metadata. Created by M. Calloway, modified by B. Calloway, sent to D. Langford. My father. I exhaled slowly, the truth prickling beneath my skin. It felt like someone had peeled away a layer of denial I didn't know I still wore. I clicked open my email archive, digging for the chain that went with that document. Brent had once shared access to a secondary inbox when he needed my help testing an app feature. He never changed the password. Typical of him, reckless in all the ways that mattered. I tried the password he used for everything. Madeline94. It worked. The inbox opened with a series of new and old messages blinking back at me. I scrolled each subject line, building a rhythm in my chest. Invoice due, wire transfer confirmation. LLC details. Consulting payout, urgent documentation request. My heartbeat synced with the clicking of the trackpad when I opened the first email. A wire transfer from something called Everline Consulting LLC, several $1,000s at a time, sent to Brent. Every memo was vague: service reimbursement, retainer, client expense. I'd seen enough back-end audits to know what these phrases really meant. Shell corporations. Fraud. A trail Brent left behind like breadcrumbs. Then a bigger breadcrumb appeared. One memo read reimbursement. DL. No, it couldn't be. Not my father. Not the man who lectured me on discipline, on honesty, on loyalty and integrity, as if he authored the words himself. I clicked another email. Then another. And then the bottom dropped out. An invoice from an entity called EL Holdings. A payout request. Authorized by Douglas L. A signature crooked and rushed, but unmistakably his. My father wasn't just connected to Brent's shady business, he was helping fund it, laundering money through a structure I recognized from every financial scandal I'd ever read about. My stomach twisted. I leaned back in my chair, heartbeat pounding so loudly I wondered if the neighbors could hear it through the walls. If they wanted my penthouse so badly, was it because they needed collateral proof of assets, a bargaining chip? A way to silence me before I stumbled upon this. It wasn't just entitlement, it wasn't just manipulation, it was survival for them. And humiliation for me. My breath tightened. I clicked another tab, an old link Brent had texted months ago. A demo login for a real estate startup he swore he was building. Back then, I tested the interface and thought nothing of it. Tonight, I typed in the same admin credentials he gave me. They still worked. Brent 2020. The dashboard opened, exposing everything he never intended anyone competent enough to understand. Fake client profiles. Altered invoices. Payout summaries. Wire transfers masked as vendor reimbursements. Each file dug deeper into the truth, and each file told me that the night he married my sister he already knew he was in trouble. That the smiling, polished exterior he showed the world was just a thin layer of paint covering something rotten. And my father was aiding it. I rubbed my temples, realizing that my family had gone from toxic to dangerous without me noticing. Maybe because I'd been too busy trying to earn their love. Or maybe because they'd conditioned me to never expect more than positions of servitude disguised as helping the family. Another email caught my eye, a forward, from Evelyn. Forwarded message. If she won't agree to hand the place over, we'll find another way. My breath hitched, then steadied. The bruise on my cheek throbbed as if remembering the moment another way arrived. A knock on the door nearly made me jump out of my skin. I froze, but then a voice came through, calm, grounding. It's Eli. I opened the door and found him holding a small to-go bag. You forgot dinner, he said simply. I stepped aside to let him in. I've been busy. He took one look at my laptop screen and didn't approach, didn't pry. Do you want to talk? He asked again, gentle but not intrusive. No, I whispered, but stay. He sat on the opposite side of the dining table, far enough not to crowd me, close enough that I could feel his presence in the quiet. It steadied me, anchored me. For a few moments we just breathed in the same room. Then I clicked open the last email on the list, the one dated 10 days ago. No sender name, no signature, just the message. If she keeps digging, we'll shut her up. My hand tightened around the side of my laptop. They really think I'm a threat, I murmured. Eli leaned slightly forward. Are you? I looked up, meeting his steady gaze. Something inside me shifted, settled, hardened. Yes, I said. I think I finally am. I closed the laptop gently, not out of fear but purpose. They had messed with my life, my home, my autonomy. They had watched me for years thinking my quiet made me weak, but they forgot one thing. Silence is where strategy is born. And I had seen enough. I transferred every file to secure cloud storage, zipped the folder, and sent a copy to Harper Boyd with a short message, "Found more. Call me tomorrow." Then, I shut the laptop and leaned back. Eli exhaled softly beside me, almost in relief. "Whatever you're planning," he said, "I hope it gives you peace." "It will," I said quietly. "Because this time, I'm not shielding anyone, not even them." Outside, the city lights flickered against the night sky, reflecting off the water like an unspoken promise. They'd left the door wide open. And now I was stepping through. Morning light slid across my bedroom floor like a quiet invitation, pale and cool, the kind of light that usually told me to slow down. But there was no slowing in me anymore. I woke with a clarity so sharp, it felt like someone had drawn a clean line through my old life during the night. My cheek no longer throbbed. My hands didn't shake. Something inside me had clicked into place, cold, precise, inevitable. I brewed coffee and stood by the window of my penthouse watching Seattle's skyline settle under a thin veil of fog. The city looked distant, almost indifferent. Maybe that's why I loved it. It never pretended to care. It never asked me to shrink. It simply existed and let me exist in return. My laptop buzzed on the counter. An email. Subject, "We need to talk today." From Harper Boyd. My lawyer didn't waste words. He never contacted me early unless something mattered. I finished my coffee, grabbed my coat, and drove downtown. The traffic was a slow-moving river of brake lights, but my mind was sharp, focused entirely on the documents I'd uncovered last night. Fraud records, shell corporations, my father's involvement, the evidence Brent never meant anyone competent to access. By the time I reached Harper's office, my resolve felt like steel. Inside, the waiting room smelled faintly of cedar. Harper opened his door before the receptionist could call my name. "Grace," he said, gesturing me in. "You look different." "I feel different." He nodded once, understanding more in those 3 words than my family had understood in 30 years. I sat across from him and he folded his hands on the desk. "I reviewed the files you sent," he said. "This isn't small. Fraud isn't just ethically wrong, it's criminal. And your father's company could be implicated if the SEC gets involved." I exhaled slowly, letting the truth settle. "I'm not looking to bring the family down," I said. "I'm looking to protect myself." "Then you need to think strategically, not emotionally," Harper replied. "Don't confront them. Don't warn them. Keep gathering, keep documenting." His gaze sharpened. "And find leverage. Something that puts the power in your hands." A thought flickered. Not warm, not vengeful, calculated. "What if I don't take anything from them?" I said softly. "What if I take what they want?" Harper's brows rose. "Tell me more." I opened my phone and pulled up the site for Crescent Shore Residences, the luxury building Brent and Madeline had obsessed over for months. The place Madeline thought would prove she'd married into a better life. The place Brent had mentioned in his financial documents before their money dried out. Harper leaned forward. "You're not thinking of buying a unit?" "No," I said. "I'm thinking of buying the entire building." He didn't blink. That was why I trusted him. "If you can afford the down payment," he said, "it's feasible. A move like that gives you leverage and removes theirs." "It gives me control," I corrected softly. "Exactly." I left his office with the kind of purpose that carried its own gravity. As soon as I sat in my car, I dialed Jenna. She answered on the second ring. crisp and warm like always. "Grace, what can I do for you? I need you," I said to schedule a private showing at Crescent Shore. "Actually, I need more than that. I want to make an offer on the whole building." There was a full second of silence. Then, "You're serious?" "I am." A low whistle. "All right then, I'll open the exclusive listing." "Wait, this is funny. What, your sister toured it in April?" "With her husband. They were enthusiastic." "Enthusiastic, meaning desperate." "Set up the meeting," I said. "1 hour," Jenna replied. "Wear something that says, 'I own this place already.'" I smiled for the first time that day. "I think I can manage that." I changed into clean lines, black slacks, ivory blouse, long coat. Quiet power. The kind of outfit my mother always said made me look too intimidating for a woman. Today, I wanted to look intimidating. Crescent Shore rose from the waterfront like a glass spine, tall and gleaming. Brent had always talked about the heated floors, the ocean views, the rooftop lounge where he'd pictured hosting parties. I stepped inside the lobby with Jenna at my side, and the place hummed with the sterile calm of new money, trying very hard to look effortless. "This building is in silent sale," Jenna whispered, tapping a folder. "Owner's retiring. They want someone who will manage it with care. They liked your preliminary financials." We entered the conference room. A wall of windows opened onto the bay. For a moment I pictured Madeline here, posing for Instagram, bragging about her view, believing she'd earned it. The owner, a silver-haired man with soft eyes, shook my hand. "I've seen your background," he said. "You build things. You manage things well. I respect that." Respect, a word I'd heard from strangers but never from my own blood. We talked numbers, terms, long-term upkeep, tenant policies. It felt like building a fortress brick by brick. Finally, he smiled. "If you'd like to make an offer," he said, "I'm ready to entertain it." I signed the letter of intent without hesitation. Jenna grinned. "I'll run the offer up the chain. Don't be surprised if we hear back before the end of the day." We stepped outside, the wind crisp and cold off the water. "That was impressive," she said. "It was necessary," I replied. My phone buzzed. A notification from Instagram. Brent had posted a story. A photo of Crescent Shore's rooftop lounge. Caption, "New beginnings soon." I stared at it, feeling nothing but a quiet, steady certainty. New beginnings indeed. I pocketed my phone and walked down the waterfront. My mind was calm, focused, sharp. When I pulled out my laptop at Harbor and Hearth later that afternoon, Eli brought my drink before I asked. "You look," he began. "Different," I offered. "No," he said softly. "Steady." I smiled faintly. On my screen, I opened the property management software I'd been building on and off for 3 years, a passion project no one had ever cared about. But tonight, as I began refining modules and adjusting back-end logic, I realized something with startling clarity. This wasn't just code. This was structure. Control. A boundary they couldn't cross. Hours later, Jenna texted. "Offer submitted. Seller very interested." Another message, "Financial review begins tomorrow." Then one final line, "They think the buyer is G. Lang." They haven't connected the dots. I closed my laptop slowly. The city outside my window glowed in soft amber lights, flickering like distant stars. "They wanted my penthouse," I murmured to myself. They had no idea I could take the ground from under them. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling deeply. This wasn't revenge. Not the old kind. Not the loud kind. This was reclamation. My life. My autonomy. My future. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was surviving my family. I felt like I was outgrowing them. 2 weeks passed in an unsettling quiet. Too smooth, too empty, like the air right before a storm decides where to break. My phone stayed still on the counter. No new messages from my parents. No guilt-laced voicemails from my mother. No barbed, sugar-coated texts from Madeline. Nothing from Brent except the fading ghost of his rooftop Instagram story. On paper, silence should have been peace. In reality, it was pressure, the kind that builds behind a dam. I was stirring sugar into my coffee when Jenna's name flashed on my phone. Subject Update Unit 9B. Her message was short, clinical, and devastatingly poetic in its own way. 2 months overdue. Eviction already in process. I blinked at the screen. Unit 9B. Madeline and Brent's temporary rental. A small, cold clarity slid through me. They weren't just entitled, they were drowning, and they hadn't said a word. I set the phone down slowly. My reflection in the black marble countertop looked back at me, steady, unflinching. I didn't message them. I didn't ask if they were okay. For once, I chose silence for myself, and not as a gift to them. Another ping. Another message from Jenna. Eviction notice already mailed. Current file lists pending owner Grace Langford. A strange electricity crawled along my spine. My name. In the place where they lived. In the place they believed they would rise into their new beginning. My name. On the paper they would receive. My name. On the door that would push them out. I sank onto the sofa and let the realizations settle through me, not with triumph, not with cruelty, just truth, the kind that rearranges you quietly. They had tried to take my home. They were losing theirs. My phone buzzed again, this time at 11:27 p.m. Madeline. Do you know the owner of Crescent Shore? They're evicting us in 7 days. Please, Grace, this has to be a mistake. Images followed photos of boxes piled in a hallway, Madeline's tear-stained face, Brent in the background, looking furious and exhausted. It should have twisted something in me. Maybe it did years ago. Tonight all I felt was the weight of patterns finally snapping. I put the phone down. 1 minute later, another message. Brent, we'll sort it out. Don't get involved. Another came 10 minutes later, desperation leaking through the cracks. Do you know someone on the owner's board? Help us? Help Mads? I stared at the message. Then at the small thumbnail of an accidental screenshot he'd attached, a bank app open on his phone. Balance $58. My breath left me in one long, unbroken exhale. Across the room, the floor-to-ceiling windows reflected the faintest glimmer of something in my expression. Not satisfaction, not gloating, something cleaner, release. The next morning, Jenna sent over a short video. You'll want to see this, her text read. I tapped play. The lobby of Crescent Shore appeared. Fluorescent lighting, marble floors, and 2 people I knew better than they ever knew me. Madeline was crying, mascara streaking down her cheeks. Brent was talking to the property manager with the false calm of a man who'd never had to take responsibility for anything in his life. His hands kept tightening and flexing as if squeezing enough air could form a plan. We paid last month, he insisted. You didn't, the manager replied. There was a banking error. There have been 2 banking errors, the manager corrected, both in your direction. Brent turned on Madeline, then voice sharp enough that the audio picked it up. You spend too much. You never think about the future. She shot back through tears. You promised we'd be living here. You said you had a plan. The staff looked on awkwardly. A couple passing through the lobby paused, whispering. My chest tightened, not with pity but with a deep, aching recognition. This is what happens when the foundation of a life is built on lies, arrogance, and borrowed identities. In the background of the video, the concierge spoke softly to another staff member. New owner won't tolerate late payments. Madeline's head snapped up. New owner who? The video cut off there. I replayed it once, then again, not out of cruelty, out of comprehension. I understood now. The slap, the demands, the timing, their desperation. My penthouse wasn't just want. It was strategy. It was survival. 7 hours later, Jenna and I sat at her office reviewing documents spread across the table. She wore her signature sharp glasses and a grin that was half professional, half amused. The interim ownership paperwork is complete. You'll have access to the building's systems today. She slid the folder toward me. I signed. My signature didn't shake. When the platform login information arrived by email, I opened it right at her desk. Tenant Madeline Calloway, status delinquent, eviction pending, landlord Grace L. I stared at that last line. People think power feels like fireworks or thunder, but no, it felt like this. Quiet, cool, precise. No triumph, only truth. Jenna leaned over my shoulder. They still think the owner is someone named G. Lang. She smirked. They have no idea. I closed my laptop slowly. That evening, as I stepped into my penthouse with takeout in hand, my phone pinged again. Brent, please, we need help, just a loan, just for a month. And then a final message from Madeline. Why are you doing this? I stood in the soft glow of my living room, letting the question sink in. The honest answer, I wasn't doing anything to them. Their own choices were doing the work. They'd crossed my boundaries. They'd treated me like a resource. They'd tried to steal my home. Now the world was simply returning their deeds to sender. Jenna texted once more before midnight. They moved out today? Quietly. No posts, no goodbyes. I set my phone down, walked to the balcony, and stepped into the cool night air. The city glimmered below, steady and indifferent. A mirror to my own steadiness. I didn't push them, I whispered. The wind tugged gently at my hair. They fell. And somewhere in the distance a night ferry hummed along the water, carrying people toward new places they had chosen for themselves. Just like I finally was. The envelope was waiting for me when I opened my front door the next morning, a plain white rectangle lying on the welcome mat like a quiet threat. No return address, no handwriting, just stillness. For a full minute I stood there staring at it, feeling the soft thud of my own heartbeat in my ears. My building had top-tier security. No one left things at my door unless they meant to. I picked it up slowly, half expecting it to be another demand, another accusation. Instead, when I tore the seal open, a printed screenshot slid out, grainy, blown up, unmistakable. A Reddit post. Title: Bride Sister slapped at wedding. Who was at fault? My breath stilled. Someone had filmed it. Not just filmed, the clip already had thousands of upvotes, hundreds of comments. I scanned the first few lines, each one hitting like a small, precise cut. Father slapped her. Not okay. She handled it like a queen. Hope she gets away from that family. My throat tightened, but not from embarrassment. Something inside me loosened just slightly, like a knot pulled free after years of choking my lungs. The world wasn't on their side. For once, the world was seeing clearly. The comments weren't humiliating. They were vindicating. My phone rang. The caller ID flashed my mother's number, but from an unknown phone. I let it ring twice, then picked up. Her voice quivered before she even spoke. Grace, oh thank God. Douglas is furious. People at the club have seen things. There are rumors. It's all getting out. Getting out. Not, are you all right? Not, I'm sorry. Always image, always reputation. I pressed my lips together. What do you want, Mom? I want this video taken down, she said, voice cracking, but not in the way grief cracks. In the way fear cracks fear for herself. Your father can't have this hanging over him. It'll ruin his standing. It didn't ruin him, I said quietly. He ruined himself. The silence on the other end was sharp. Then she whispered, You don't understand the pressure he's under. No, I answered. I understand perfectly. I hung up. Moments later, another notification came through, this time from a friend I hadn't spoken to in years. Her message was hesitant, almost apologetic. Saw Mads at the discount market on 5th. She looked rough. A photo followed, taken discreetly. Madeline pushing a cart, eyes puffy, Brent trailing behind with a forced expression, his shirt wrinkled, his energy exhausted. Two people who had lived their entire lives believing ease was their birthright now had cracks running through every inch of the image. I didn't zoom in. I didn't need to. It was obvious. The golden child had fallen, and she had not fallen gracefully. My phone buzzed again, another message from the same friend. They were arguing. Loud. Something about money. I let the phone dim and set it aside. I thought of all the years I had watched Madeline get bailed out mistakes, smoothed over tantrums, excused debts covered. I thought of every time I had been told your sister needs this more, as if my needs were optional and hers were sacred. Now their lives were unraveling thread by thread. But it wasn't because of me. It was because of the life they'd built on foundations that couldn't hold their weight. The next text came from an unknown number. Douglas is under review, it read. He didn't tell you, did he? This is going to get bad. A chill rolled down my spine. Not fear, not guilt, just dawning understanding. My father's world wasn't steady anymore. His carefully curated image had cracks, and people in his circles had begun to whisper. Men like him didn't survive whispers. They needed obedience, fear, loyalty, all the things he'd burned through long ago. And now the world was asking questions. Around noon, my mother texted again. We need to talk, please. This is bigger than you know. Before I could think, another message popped up, this one from Madeline. Why are you doing this? You're destroying everything. I didn't reply. It wasn't my job to correct her. She'd been raised to believe her life was something to be handed to her. She'd never learned what responsibility felt like. But Brent, his silence unnerved me. For once he wasn't posturing, wasn't lecturing, wasn't pretending to be the genius he convinced everyone he was. That silence was worse than his smugness. Later that afternoon, I received one more notification, this time from a stranger who followed real estate gossip. Your sister's husband has problems at work. Rumors about financial irregularities. I sat back, letting the pieces assemble themselves like puzzle fragments snapping into place. Madeline losing her apartment. Brent being investigated. My father under review. My mother panicking. Every corner of their world was shaking. And now the tremors were pointing toward me. Evelyn called again that evening, using the same unknown number. I picked up only because I was tired of the vibration humming against the table. She sounded smaller this time, not theatrical, just worn. Grace, can we please meet? Why, I asked. Her breath caught a strange mixture of shame and calculation breaking through her voice. Because I think everything is falling apart. You mean, I said calmly, you're finally seeing what being held accountable looks like. She didn't deny it. We met the next morning near Green Lake, where she used to take us as kids on breezy Sunday afternoons. Today the air had a bite to it, and she stood stiffly beneath a bare tree, her hands wrapped around a coffee cup like a lifeline. When she saw me, her face softened for a moment, too quickly to be sincere. You look different, she whispered. I am different. Her throat bobbed. Your father's in trouble. Madeline is... She sighed. She's not well. She doesn't understand what's happening. She thinks you're punishing her. I'm not punishing her, I said. She's facing the consequences of her choices. There's a difference. Evelyn's eyes glistened. We depended on you too much, she whispered. We always have. It was the closest she'd ever come to an apology. And still it wasn't one. You used me, I corrected softly. She didn't argue. We stood in silence for a moment before she spoke again, her voice barely above a tremor. Are you coming to my birthday dinner next week? The question hung there, an old hook tied to an old wound. I don't know, I said truthfully. Her eyes lowered. It would mean something. To you, I replied. Not to me. Her inhale shook. Do you still see us as family? I didn't answer. Because the answer wasn't simple, wasn't kind, wasn't cruelty either. It was just true. When she turned to leave, she hesitated, glancing over her shoulder. Grace, did you buy Crescent Shore? I didn't speak. I didn't move. My silence was the only answer she needed. Her face paled. Her gaze flickered, realization striking her like a quiet lightning bolt. She walked away without another word. That night, when I returned home, Jenna's email was waiting. Final approval almost complete. Ownership transfer expected soon. I leaned against the window, watching lights ripple across the water, feeling the final puzzle piece click into place. I didn't make them fall, I just stopped holding them up. But even falling stars cause damage. and mine were headed straight toward me. The knock came just after sunset, 3 slow taps that didn't echo with urgency but with hesitation. I looked up from my laptop and felt a ripple of something colder than surprise. Only one person knocked like that. Only one person stood tall enough to cast that long, unmistakable shadow across the frosted glass of my door. I crossed the living room and checked the security camera before opening anything. There he was, Douglas Langford, my father, standing alone in the hallway, shoulders squared out of habit but hands fidgeting with the hem of his jacket. I had never seen him fidget before in my life. He didn't ring the bell again. He just waited like a man preparing himself to face a truth he could no longer outrun. I unlocked the door but didn't step aside. 5 minutes, I said. He nodded once stiffly. That's all I'm asking. He hadn't been drinking. His eyes were painfully clear, too clear. A sobering clarity that made him look older, smaller, human in a way he never allowed himself to be. He tried to glance past me into the penthouse, but I blocked the doorway. I wasn't letting him in. Not physically, not emotionally, not anymore. I heard you're moving Madeline and Brent back home, I said. A muscle twitched along his jaw. They had nowhere else to go. I nodded once. I know. An uneasy silence stretched between us, thick enough to taste. You've seen the posts, he said finally. The videos. My cheek tingled, phantom pain blooming like fresh bruises. Everyone has. His gaze flickered. People don't know the full story. I know, I said. And I was there. That's enough. He flinched just barely, but enough for me to notice. My father had always been made of stone. Tonight the stone was cracked. I came to talk, he murmured. To explain. You didn't come to apologize, I asked. He shifted his weight. Not answering was answer enough. I folded my arms, leaning against the doorframe. Go on. He exhaled, looking away like the hallway walls had suddenly become easier to face than me. My career is being questioned. People are assuming things. They're digging into my record, things from years ago. Things that have nothing to do with you. You're under review, I said flatly. I know. He looked back sharply. Who told you? Someone who respects me, I replied. Which is more than I can say for the people who raised me. Douglas's face hardened for a moment, the old dominance crackling beneath his skin. But he pushed it down quickly, too quickly. Your sister is devastated, he tried instead. She keeps asking why you would do this. I haven't done anything to her, I said. Actions have consequences. She's just not used to meeting hers. His throat worked. She misses you. No, I corrected. She misses what she could take from me. My father swallowed his Adam's apple, bobbing. Grace, this family is falling apart. It was broken long before I stopped pretending, I replied. For the first time in my entire life, he didn't argue. His voice softened, barely audible. I didn't mean to hit you. There it was. Not an apology. A justification wrapped in regret. You meant it, I said. You were angry, I said no. And you hit me because you thought you were entitled to my life. My home, my choices. He closed his eyes as if the truth stung worse than the accusation. I kept going. You didn't slap me because you lost control. You slapped me because you lost ownership. His eyelids opened slowly. He looked older, defeated. You're wrong. No, I said softly. I finally stopped being wrong. A tension rippled through him, something between shame and defensiveness. He opened his mouth, then shut it again, searching for footing that no longer existed beneath him. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out an envelope. Your mother wanted you to have this. He handed it to me as if it weighed 100 pounds. Inside, I already knew what I'd find. An invitation. Cream cardstock. Soft gold script. I glanced at it but didn't open it. Her birthday dinner? Yes, he said quietly. Family only. The irony was sour and sharp on my tongue. Family only. The phrase that had always meant everyone else mattered more than me. So now I'm included, I asked. His jaw tightened. Grace, we're trying. I raised an eyebrow. Are you? He swallowed again, harder this time. Your mother is scared. She's afraid of losing you. No, I corrected gently. She's afraid of losing her image. There's a difference. A beat of silence. Then another. What do you want from us? He asked, finally, voice fraying. Nothing, I said. And that's what terrifies you. He shook his head, sighing from somewhere deep, somewhere hollow. You've changed. I've stopped apologizing, I replied. Something flickered in his eyes, recognition maybe. Or loss. I couldn't tell. Then he stepped back, his shoulders sinking like a man walking into winter without a coat. You may think you've won, he said softly, almost mournfully. But you don't know everything. My pulse didn't spike. I'd lived under his cryptic warnings for years. They no longer carried weight. Maybe not, I said. But I know enough. We stood there in the quiet hallway, him wounded by truths he'd spent decades avoiding, me braced by the clarity I'd earned the hard way. He turned to leave. For the first time, he didn't straighten his spine or broaden his shoulders. He didn't perform strength. He simply walked to the elevator like any other man facing consequences of his own making. Just before the doors closed, he met my eyes. I hope you come, he said. For your mother's sake, I'll think about it. The doors slid shut with a soft metallic whisper. I walked back inside and placed the envelope on the kitchen counter unopened. I didn't touch it again. It sat there like a question I hadn't decided to answer. The city lights shimmered through the windows, and my penthouse felt light. Still, entirely mine, he had come for forgiveness. All I offered was truth. The envelope sat untouched on my counter for 3 days, its soft cream edges glowing faintly under the afternoon light. Every time I passed it, I felt its presence tug at me. Not with sentiment, not with guilt, but with a quiet question I wasn't sure I wanted to answer. It wasn't the invitation itself that unsettled me. It was the handwriting, my mother's delicate cursive, a little shakier than usual, looping across the card with forced elegance. Family only. Those 2 words had never included me before. They had always meant everyone except me. And now they were supposed to pull me back in like a rope around my ribs. On the 4th evening I opened it. I didn't linger. I didn't trace the letters or analyze the meaning. I simply read it once, set it down, and realized deeply simply I wasn't the same person they had slapped in front of 250 guests. I didn't belong to their table anymore, but I decided to go, not for them, but to finally see what remained of that old life. I arrived 15 minutes late on purpose. For once, the lateness wasn't an accident or a plea for forgiveness. It was a statement, a boundary, a reminder that my time no longer revolved around their expectations. The restaurant was warm and dimly lit, its golden chandeliers reflecting off wine glasses and polished cutlery. I stepped inside and felt the shift immediately. Conversations dipped. Forks paused midair, eyes sharp, curious, whispering turned toward me. That's her, someone murmured near the bar. The daughter he slapped. I kept walking. Their stares didn't scorch me the way they once did. If anything, they barely reached my skin. The hostess led me toward the private dining room. As she opened the door, the low hum of chatter inside dipped into a stilted hush. My family sat around a long table, draped in linen plates, half-filled, expressions half frozen. My father looked up first. His posture was stiff, sober, almost formal. My mother's smile was too quick, too wide, brittle at the edges. Madeline sat near the corner, shoulders drawn and makeup muted, and eyes swollen from nights she'd never admit to crying through. Brent was next to her, wearing a wrinkled shirt that looked like it had been pulled from the bottom of a laundry basket. I stepped inside and no one rose, not even my mother. "Grace," she said finally, her voice soft with relief she didn't quite know how to express. "I'm glad you came." I nodded once, then pulled out a chair at the far end of the table, not next to her, not next to anyone, and sat down without waiting to be welcomed. The silence was thick, awkward, different from the silence I'd grown up with. This one wasn't mine to carry. A distant relative, the kind who remembered my name, Only when gossiping leaned toward the person beside her and whispered not nearly quietly enough. She looked strong, not broken. Then more quietly, good for her. It almost startled me. Evelyn cleared her throat, trying to salvage the moment. "Grace, would you like some wine? I'll get it," I said, standing before she could perform hostess. I poured my own drink, feeling her watch me with a mix of awe and worry. When I returned to my seat, my father attempted a conversation. "It's good to have everyone together," he said stiffly. I met his eyes. "I came to see Mom." The words landed heavily, cutting through the air like a clean blade. A few relatives exchanged looks. My father set his fork down slowly, the metal clinking against porcelain. No one argued. No one corrected me. For the first time they understood that my truth wasn't a phase, it was permanent. Across the table, Madeline shifted. She looked like she wanted to say something but couldn't form the words. Brent squeezed her hand under the table, a gesture that was supposed to be reassuring but looked more like a warning. I saw the flinch she tried to hide. My chest tightened, not with pity but with recognition. She chose him, and the life she chose was holding her by the wrist. At one point, a cousin I barely knew leaned toward me with a small, hesitant smile. "How have you been, Grace?" It was the first time a single person at a family event had ever asked me that. I blinked once, then said better. They nodded like they understood. The dinner dragged on with stilted small talk about weather and work and trivialities meant to patch the cracks in the room. No one dared bring up Crescent Shore. No one mentioned the eviction. No one talked about the trending video or the investigation circling my father. They danced around the truth so carefully it made the air feel fragile. At one point, my mother turned to me with her hands folded tightly in her lap. "Grace, I know things have been difficult." I waited. "But tonight is about family," she finished weakly. Then maybe I said family should start by being honest. Her lips parted, then closed again. She didn't look at Douglas. That alone told me everything I needed to know. I didn't stay long. Halfway through dessert, I pushed my chair back quietly. The leg scraped softly, but to everyone around the table it sounded like thunder. "I'm heading out," I said. My mother's eyes darted up, panic flickering in them. "Wait, Grace, happy birthday, Mom," I said gently. "I truly wish you peace." She looked like she wanted to stand, to hug me, to say something more, but she froze, afraid of the eyes watching her. Afraid of the truth she still couldn't admit out loud. No one else tried to stop me. No one called after me. No one pretended the night had gone well. As I walked out, I heard a whisper drift across the room, one I wasn't meant to hear. "She didn't lose them," a relative murmured. "They lost her." Outside, the Seattle air was sharp and cold, but it tasted clean. I pulled my coat tighter around me and started walking, the soft glow of the city guiding me forward. Silence used to terrify me. Tonight it felt like freedom. I wasn't walking away from them. I was walking back to myself. The sun dipped low behind the Seattle skyline, casting warm gold across my balcony, as if the day itself wanted to wrap me gently in light. I stepped outside with a small stack of documents in hand, the breeze lifting the edges like it was eager to read them too. The city below hummed softly. Ferries glided through the sound. For the first time in months, maybe years, my lungs expanded without catching on old pain. An email notification lit my phone. Subject: official ownership transfer completed. I tapped it open, and there it was, my name printed cleanly beside a line that felt like a new chapter carved in stone. Owner: Grace Langford, property Crescent Shore Residences. A steady warmth settled in my chest. Not triumph. Not revenge. Something quieter, something steadier, something like reclamation. The kind that comes after you walk through the fire and realize your own footsteps were the only thing that carried you out. I sat at the balcony table and signed the last digital documents, my fingers calm, my breath even. Ownership had never been about possession. It had been about taking back the parts of myself my family tried to claim without permission. My penthouse wasn't just a home. Crescent Shore wasn't just a building. They were boundaries carved in glass and steel. Below the city, Lights blinked on one by one, shimmering across the water like a constellation rising from the earth instead of the sky. Inside, my kitchen buzzed faintly. I'd set the oven earlier. Dinner was nearly ready. Slowly, my home filled with familiar voices, not of my family, but of the people who had shown up for me when I no longer knew how to show up for myself. Jenna arrived first, carrying a bottle of wine with a bow tied around the neck. "Celebratory or consolatory?" she asked with a grin. "Celebratory," I said, feeling the truth of it settle warmly inside me. Harper followed, offering a knowing nod and a small wrapped package, a fountain pen in brushed gold. "To sign the things that matter," he said. Then Eli came last, knocking softly the way only he did. He stepped in carrying a small bakery box, the hint of cinnamon drifting out as he opened it. "Thought you might need dessert? That doesn't taste like stress," he said, smiling a little too shyly. We gathered on the balcony as the last light faded. Soft jazz played from a small speaker. The table glowed with candles. The city stretched endlessly before us, wide, generous, free. "This place feels lighter tonight," Eli murmured as he took a seat beside me. "It finally is," I said. We ate. We laughed. We didn't speak of my father or mother or Madeline or Brent. No whispered commentary, no guilt, no pleas for attention. Just warmth, genuine warmth. At one point, I leaned back in my chair, letting the soft breeze brush against my cheek, and I realized something quietly monumental. I wasn't lonely. I wasn't grieving. I wasn't waiting anymore. I was home. After dinner, Eli walked to the edge of the balcony with me, resting his hands lightly on the railing. "You stood alone for too long," he said softly. "You don't have to anymore." I looked at him, letting the words settle exactly where they needed to. "I know," I whispered. And this time I meant it. The others joined us, raising their glasses in an unspoken toast. It wasn't loud or performative. It didn't need to be. It was simple. It was sincere. "To new beginnings," Jenna said. "To peace," Harper added. "And to choosing your own life," Eli finished, quietly meeting my eyes. I lifted my glass, feeling something within me click into place, the last piece of a long, jagged puzzle finally fitting where it belonged. "To all of that," I said. "And to the freedom no one can take from me again." We drank. The night breathed around us, gentle and forgiving. Later, when they'd all left and the candles had burned low, I stood alone under the open sky, watching the lights of Crescent Shore flicker in the distance. My building now. My ground, my boundary. "They tried to take my home," I whispered to the city, "and ended up giving me my freedom." The truth of it settled over me like a warm blanket. I walked inside, placed the empty wine glasses in the sink, and let the soft hum of the dishwasher fill the space with a comforting rhythm. Everything felt steady. Everything felt earned. Before turning in for the night, I stood before the window once more. And because I've learned that healing becomes real when shared, I spoke softly, not to the skyline, not to the empty room, but to anyone who has ever carried the weight I once did. If you've ever been forced to choose between your peace, your family's expectations, choose yourself. You deserve to be whole. And if you're listening now, if this story touched something in you, then don't leave quietly. Tell me what part of this journey resonated. Tell me if you've ever had to set boundaries with the people you loved. Tell me where you are in the world, or what moment in your own life made you finally say enough. Like, share, subscribe. Leave your story below, because your voice matters here, and your freedom matters even more.